Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." But when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, and by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word that I too may come and worship him." After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Now when they departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and the mother and flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for this child to destroy him." And so he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all of the male children in Bethlehem and in all of that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. This is the word of the Lord.
I was talking with a Torin earlier before the service started. He asked, what passage are we going to be in? What's our topic today? And I said, well, we'll be in the rest of Matthew 2, where Herod goes on a rage and slaughters all the innocents. A very cheerful Christmas message. Okay, so here's part of the reason why we're going to talk about this passage. If you drive down the road here, it almost looks like they're having a competition, a couple of these houses. I don't know if you live in one of these houses by chance over here, but it almost, you can let me know if there is. I'd be curious. But it almost seems like there's a competition to see who can have the best decorations and really the best inflatables going on out there. It's a wonder that there aren't more accidents right out here, because you're coming on both sides of the street. You're looking at these inflatables and trying to see what new inflatables. And did you know that now there are inflatables of the nativity scene, right? The manger and Mary and Joseph. I'd never seen these before, or maybe I hadn't noticed them, but I'm noticing it this year as I'm looking at the inflatables. And what's interesting about that is, like, okay, before that, whenever you would go and you would see an elaborate Christmas display, and if they had a nativity scene there, it kind of stood out because it would be different from the other ones, right? Everything would have their fancy LED lights and maybe their inflatables, and then if they had a nativity scene, it was kind of old school. It was, the older plastic ones, or maybe somebody had actually built like a stable or a manger out of wood or whatever. And so it just sort of stood out a little bit more. But now you see the inflatables, and it just kind of blends in with the rest of them, with Santa on the motorcycle, with the dancing snowman, with the saxophone, and everything else. And So I think the tension that maybe we all feel this time of year is like that is the tension of the Christmas, the American Christmas experience. Right? On the one hand, that's the story of Jesus and his birth and what all that means. But then on the other hand, it's Santa and snowman and everything, right? And we're all part of that. And one of our increasingly favorite Christmas traditions is the last day of the kids' school. Amy dresses up in a Mrs. Claus outfit that she got at a thrift store for $3, and we go and individually grab and pick up all three of the kids while we are blasting Christmas music, and she's walking to them, giving them a big hug. And so if our kids ever wind up in therapy now, you know why. Right? But so there's always that tension, right? We're enjoying all of that, and we're enjoying all that Jesus is and all that means. Right? The tension or the danger is that the radicalness of this story that we've been hearing this morning just sort of blends in and just becomes a part of the general warmth, fuzziness, coziness of not just Christmas decorations, but the whole Christmas season. Right? And actually, I think that in general, we've kind of already done that with a lot of the elements of the Christmas story. We've tamed them down, at least in our minds, right? We forget just how borderline revolutionary it was that angels would come to a group of shepherds in Nazareth with a very politically charged message. We can't get into all that, but it really is. Or, if you go and you actually read Mary's song, the one that the kids sang up here, but you actually read it in the text, and you sit and think about what she's saying. Like, it almost reads like some woke manifesto or something like that. Go read it again sometime with fresh eyes. Like, there's a lot of charged stuff in this story that we have just kind of softened, so it just kind of blends into the general Christmas ethos, right? And maybe why I'm drawn to this passage, Matthew 2, is because it refuses to be, to blend in. It refuses to be tamed down, so much so that we probably don't hear it so much anymore. Like, I don't venture to think that many of you tomorrow, when you're reading your Christmas stories to your children, are going to read The Slaughter of the Innocents by Herod. Or it's probably some time before we're ever going to see inflatable Herods and inflatable soldiers with their swords thrusting them into 2-year-old children, right? I don't imagine we're going to see that. This story, it refuses to blend in. And so to wrestle with it, and I think the other beauty of the story is it really gets to the heart of what's going on here and what it's all about. It won't let us escape that. And this story just offers, I think, a simple challenge for us, and that's what I'm going after this morning. This is a very simple challenge. It's not going to take very long here. But so think with me. Let's just talk through this story. First of all, you've got 3 sets of characters. You've got these wise men who are coming, bringing their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right, their costly treasures to Jesus. And these are interesting characters in and of themselves. Like, when you turn the page into the New Testament, you're not expecting wise men from the East coming. For one, they're foreigners. And up to this point in the story, it almost seemed like, the story of what God was doing in the world was kind of reserved for an exclusive group of people. But now not so much. You turn the page into Matthew, and all of a sudden, the doors are opening wide. So here come these foreigners from the East, and not from the Orient like the song says. They're probably from Persia. They're Arabs. They're coming. Right? And our English translations say wise men, but in the Greek it's magi. And magi in the ancient world, these are essentially practitioners of the mystical arts, right, in the foreign kingdoms. Think Merlin, think like the king's wizards. Right? These are the guys who are astrologists, and these are the guys thought to have some sort of connection with the deeper magic and mystical things, all of which is to say that that wasn't too... That's kind of frowned on in ancient Israel, still sort of frowned on, in the church, right? So it's just odd that these guys are here. And maybe if there's a third strike against these guys, it would be that if you actually go back and you read, the Old Testament, magi, they don't have beloved roles in the storyline. Right? They're the ones who are plotting to have Daniel killed because he's still praying to the God of Israel instead of the God of Nebuchadnezzar or whatever. right? So it's odd that you have these magi coming, right? But you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss the significance of these outsider, weird, mystical, magical people coming because they hear that there's a king who's been born. And they come and they bring costly treasures, the type of treasures that Mary and Joseph or their other peasant neighbors, they very well may never see in their lifetime, right? They're coming and they're falling on their knees and depositing them before this child king, right? It's one group. So then you got Herod. Herod is a fascinating historical character. If you ever get a chance, just go read the Wikipedia page on Herod. Like this guy, oh man, we could spend all day talking about Herod. He's a political genius. How he comes to power in the day of Roman civil wars that were going on, like just go read it. It's fascinating. Like this guy is bold with all get out, right? And not only that, but Herod had managed to secure a certain measure of peace with Rome for Israel and Jerusalem. He had even managed to, what's the word I'm looking for? To sort of gain even more benefits from Rome for Israel, right? And Herod is doing all these incredible civic projects, throughout Israel. He's building this beautiful temple for the people. He's got all these great palaces. When I got to go to Israel about a year and a half or so ago, well, no, geez, we're coming up on 2 years ago now. We went to Masada, which is out in the Judean wilderness, overlooks the Dead Sea, and it's this really high mountain, all rock. Nothing's growing on it. It's just all rock. But you get to the very top of it, and there's fortresses in there, and then you also have a palace that Herod built, like this 3-tiered palace at the very top on the edge of the cliff, like built into the cliff. Like it's just incredible, the stuff that this guy did. Okay, but then there's this other side of Herod where he is maniacal about his kingdom. He's maniacal about preserving his power. He's maniacal about holding on to all that he's built. He's maniacal about his reputation. And if he catches even just a whiff that somebody is posing a threat to him, he has them eliminated. So many people he would have eliminated. So much so he had his own wife killed because she got kind of suspicious to him. And then, of course, you might as well kill off the in-laws if you're going to kill the wife, right? He had his uncle killed. He even had a couple of his sons killed. The saying of Herod back in the day, I'd rather be a dog in the house of Herod than one of his sons, right? Because that's how maniacal he was about his power. So when he catches wind that, hey, there are these people coming that say, hey, we've heard that there's been one born king of the Jews, and they tell him where it is. Oh, Herod, well, hey, when you find him, come let me know so that I can come and worship this little guy myself. All the while knowing that, he just wants to take him out. And the thing is, I think Herod, for whatever, like he understands what's going on here, and I think he's right? Right, this Jesus, this baby king, isn't coming in intending to just kind of blend in to the ethos of the day. He's not just coming in intent on just blending in with Herod's kingdom, right? He is coming in as a rival for Herod's throne. He is coming in as a rival for Herod's kingdom. He is coming in to call Herod's citizens, his subjects, his people, out of that kingdom into a far greater kingdom. So Herod gets it, whether he realizes it or not. All right, and then there's one more group of people in here. Did you pick it up there in verse 3? When they heard, the wise men come saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. Verse 3, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Look, all Jerusalem also gets troubled at word that there is this would-be king that's been born. Right? And so you ask the question, well, why is all Jerusalem troubled at this too? Like you would think, well, isn't that good news? Here comes a king. Well, they could be a little bit troubled because they know Herod. And they know how Herod gets when rumor is that there's a rival to the kingdom and that he's probably going to fly off in some fit of rage again. That could be, though you would think if that was the case, it would be all Bethlehem that was nervous. right? The message of the religious leaders is that he's going to be born in Bethlehem. So it raised the question, like, why is Jerusalem all up in arms and all worried about this king? We don't necessarily know. But if I were to venture a guess, I might say that, well, in Jerusalem, how's the old song go about New York City, right? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that might be what the case in Jerusalem in Israel at that time, right? If you had made it in Jerusalem and you had built a life in Jerusalem, life was probably going pretty well for you at that point. Jerusalem was the epicenter of Israel. It was the epicenter of, the kingdom there. It was a very important city then in the Roman Empire, right? And they were enjoying a lot of the kickbacks that were coming from Rome. And so, it's quite possible that if you're in Jerusalem, though you're not a huge fan of Herod, you are kind of thankful for the peace that he has kind of secured for you. Peace that has, been kind of fickle and hard to hold on to for the past couple hundred years. So Herod at least has secured peace, and maybe you enjoy that. Maybe you enjoy some of the kickbacks that have come to Jerusalem from the Roman Empire. Maybe just in general, you're thankful for the peace, the comfort that you have, and you're not too excited about somebody who potentially could come in and upset the whole apple cart here. Right? Maybe you're, just so much enjoying the comfort and the peace and the status quo that you're not looking for somebody who's going to come in and stage some sort of political coup or some sort of political revolt that's going to get Herod all worked up, that maybe is going to catch the attention of Rome and cause Rome to come in and squash the rebellion as they would often do. Right, so it's these people actually that pose the challenge, I think, to me. Because I imagine these people as just very comfortable and very much in love with their comfort and the peacefulness that they've secured, the status quo, and are not looking for someone to come in and push on that status quo. And I think in a similar way, right? Maybe if we're all honest, there are times when, we're excited and we're thrilled and we're joyful about the message of Jesus. And so long as Jesus, his message to us is one of salvation and one of life, and we can see that Jesus, very clearly is leading us into an even greater, deeper, more full and joyful and rich life. Yes, we're all about Jesus, but the moment Jesus would call us out of our comfort level, or maybe the moment Jesus would call us out from inordinate loves in our own heart, where maybe we are tempted to bow down and to worship other things higher than him, and maybe where Jesus would call us out of that and call us to sacrifice those things, to get in on what he is up to. Now, maybe we're not so sure about this guy who's coming in to upset the apple cart of the status quo. One last thing in the story. So, because of, angel comes to the Magi, warns them not to go back to Herod, and then a message is given to Mary and Joseph, hey, you got to flee, you got to get out of town, because Herod's going to try to destroy him. And so Mary, Joseph, Jesus, they have to go be refugees in Egypt until Herod's dead, and it's safe for them to come back. And sure enough, after Herod dies, the threat is over, they come back to Israel. And then Matthew gives us this curious line. He says, and this was to fulfill what God had spoken by the prophets, that out of Egypt I have called my son. Right, and so here's the thing, right? You can go back into the Old Testament and you can go find the prophets and you can find where that saying is, out of Egypt I called my son. It's actually in the book of Hosea. And the interesting thing about it is that if you read it in its original context, if you open up the book of Hosea and you read it and you come across that line, out of Egypt I called my son, it is explicitly clear that Hosea is he's looking back in time. And he's talking about the time when God ransomed his people, Israel, out of captivity in Egypt. In various points in the Old Testament, Israel is referred to as God's son, their firstborn son. Can't get into all that. But that's what Hosea is saying. Like, out of Egypt, I have called my son. Clearly referring back to the Exodus. And so Matthew does this interesting thing where he says, but the ultimate fulfillment of that is when Mary, Joseph, and Jesus come out of Egypt as refugees back to Israel. And Come on, Stephen, you probably have seminary classes where you're talking about this exegetical move here. We're not going to dive into it. Go talk to Stephen afterwards and see if he's learning anything in seminary down in Florida. I don't know what. Never mind. I'm not going to make Florida jokes because I think we have some Florida people visit. Anyway, so Matthew's making an interesting move here. I would just say he's doing a couple things. First of all, as Matthew does in numerous places in the beginning of his book, he takes all that's come before in the Old Testament story, and points it forward to Jesus. It says, yeah, this is the new epicenter of this whole story. This is what the whole thing is about. This is where everything goes now from here. You might also be saying that this Jesus is starting a new Exodus, a new and greater salvation moment. But even more than that, I think part of what he's saying is like this Jesus is coming to identify with his people and identify with the story of his people in such a powerful and intimate way. Like he literally is becoming the new Israel because as he is identifying with them in such a close and intimate way. And isn't that what ultimately the Christmas story is all about? Isn't that what the incarnation is? The wonder of it, right? That God, the creator God, the one who breathed life into all things. Man, I can't stress enough how radical this would have been in the ancient world. That the creator God would be so moved in his heart by compassion, by care, by concern for the people that he had made. So concerned to come and deliver them from this life that was far removed from the life that he ultimately intended for them, such that he would come and he would enter into this broken world. That he would come and enter into the darkness, all the corruption, all the wickedness, so that ultimately he might lead his people into the life that he ultimately intended for them. Like that's the heart and soul of the Christmas message. Right? And when you think about that, okay, then you very quickly realize that yes, okay, this Jesus that's born here, he is a king, or he's coming with every intent to be a king. To claim, to restore the kingdom, to call people into it so that he might lead them into life, into the full. Man, but the thing is, this is a king unlike any other king the world has ever known. Right? This is not a king who's out for some power grab. This is not some king who's maniacal about the kingdom that he's built and what he's built with his hands and holding on to it desperately. This is a king who was willing to leave the glories of heaven and be born in poverty. Born to a peasant family from some backwoods town in Nazareth, not in a position of privilege or power or prestige or any of that. He was left the glories of heaven to be born in poverty. He was one who left the glories of heaven to enter in and to knowing full well that he was going to have to become a refugee. Because from the moment he was born, the powers that be were going to be out to kill him. This is a king who is going to grow up to have great care and compassion for the sick, the poor, the wounded, the weary, the sinful, and then yet ultimately be despised and rejected by his countrymen, and ultimately be abandoned by those who were closest to him. Like, this is the king who willingly and knowingly entered into a broken world with the intent of bearing the full weight of all the brokenness, all the corruption, all the violence and hatred, all the wickedness and evil, all the sinfulness of his people's hearts on himself, and let it crush him into death so that he might be raised in victory over it, and then lead his people in victory into newness of life. Right? Like, that is this king. And this is a king, like when you stop and you consider that, when you think about the Christmas story and why this is all happening, you realize this is a king unlike any other, and this is a king who is worthy to be handed my costliest treasures. Right? This is a king who is worthy to be handed the things that I value most deeply and most sacredly in life. Right? This is the king who is worthy of coming in and upsetting my status quo, and maybe calling me out of the comfortable, peaceful, cozy life that I had known. Right? This is a king who is worthy I've been trusting my whole life to. And so the simple challenge, I think this morning, well, I think that's the challenge right there. Like the challenge is, here's the story. Like, how do you respond? Right? Do you respond like the wise men who come with all of their costliest treasures? They see what's going on here. They want in on this. And so they get on their knees and they lay what's most sacred and valuable to them at the feet of Jesus. Are you like Herod that sees a threat here and wants to get this threat out of the way? Or are you like Israel or all of Jerusalem that, well, I don't know what to do about this, but this is posing some sort of like threat to my comfort and security, and so I am at the very least troubled by it. Man, my prayer for you this morning, and I think the wonderful invitation for all of us here this morning, is just to don't let this story blend in. There's the challenge. Don't let it blend into the background. Maybe take this episode here and let it stand out so starkly that you can't avoid what's going on and what the meaning of it is. And as you can't escape it, as you can't get around it, maybe just settle into it. Find a quiet time and do what Mary did and just quietly pondered all of these things in her heart and just consider the wonder, the glory, the depth of beauty that is going on in the story, that your Creator would do this on your behalf. Man, if you're coming up with against the story for the very first time, and maybe you've seen all these manger scenes and you've seen the inflatables, and you went, well, I'm just kind of curious what this is all about. Well, then I would just challenge you to ask the question, like, what if? Like, what if this really all went down? That the one who gave you life and breath was so moved with compassion for you that he entered into the broken world, ultimately to suffer so that he might lead you into life. You know, or maybe you've heard this story ever since you were a kid, but maybe you've long since moved beyond the story and you've built a nice, comfortable life for yourself. Same challenge to you. Yeah, maybe just take a step back, reconsider this story, and consider, is this king calling you into something even more deep and more rich and more wonderful than you could have even imagined? Or if you're one who a long time ago has entrusted your life to Jesus and never turned back, it's the same thing for you. I hope that you will just find a moment to do as Mary does, to stop and to ponder all these things. Let the wonder and the beauty of it overwhelm you again, such that you are filled with deeper joy, deeper peace, deeper love, all those things that we talked about during the Advent season. Or, to quote the old preacher, Charles Spurgeon, as his voice, may you remember that as his voice to you is come, maybe your response to him will be, come, Lord, and abide with me. Come occupy the throne of my heart. Reign there without rival and consecrate me entirely to thy service. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas, and I hope as part of that wonderful Christmas, God would lead you into experiencing the richness, the depth of it anew, such that it would be your deepest joy to hand over the throne of your heart and to get in on this strange kingdom, and even to consider what it means to live as a part of this strange and wild kingdom, all for his own honor and glory, we ask. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This time I'm looking for some kids, I think, who are coming back. No, we're gonna. I think we're gonna stand and sing. I'll get the worship team to come back, and let's stand and sing. Hark the Herald Angels Sing as the kids will come, and I think they're gonna close out our service actually.